Welcome to the Midlife Fulfilled podcast. Are you over 40 and ready to truly thrive? Well, on this podcast, we go deep on ways to thrive across the 5 pillars of midlife: health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. I'm Bernie Borges, midlife advocate, life coach, and your host. Subscribe now and get ready to thrive. James and Claire Davis, welcome to the Midlife Fulfilled podcast, a maximum episode.
Hello,
hey, Bernie.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Let me give you both a little bit of an introduction for my listener. James and Claire, you run one of Europe's most successful luxury fitness retreat companies since 2012, 38 Degrees North. And you have trained thousands of clients. You've won multiple awards. You've gotten all kinds of accolades and praise. And you are the host of the Midlife Mentors podcast since 2019. And I've listened, not since 2019, but I've listened to quite a few of them. I've been kind of stalking you out there for a while now. And you've got a program called the Midlife Reset Transformational Program. So love to hear something about that. Now, you both were in the corporate rat race for some time, significant time. We'll hear a little bit about that. And of course, you experienced what a lot of us experience in that rat race: emptiness, unhealthy behavior, etc. But you found a way to transform. And I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about specifically your relationship, because you two are a couple. And I think you came together in a midlife season, if I'm not mistaken. I'd like to hear something about that. But first, let's begin. Tell us a little bit of that rat race story that led to your transformation.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll wind it right back. I've always been fascinated by human behavior. Why do people behave the way they do, and how can we change that behavior? So I studied psychology at university, then went on to do a master's in applied psychology, and actually started into that field, but got distracted by, let's say, youth lifestyle and journalism. So we had a big music scene in the UK at the time, and I kind of got pulled into that and writing for magazines, which led to an alternative career as a journalist. And then I gradually worked more in the media, in commercial business development, then strategy side. And that was great. It was a fulfilling career, but I kind of knew I wanted more. So in 2011, a role kind of came to an end, and I was like, right, this is it. I'm going to this island in the Mediterranean called Ibiza, which I kind of knew from the music scene, but also knew it's a beautiful island. And I went with the idea of setting up a retreats business. And back then, retreats were really all focused around, they're either kind of like yoga and very esoterical, or they're focused on weight loss. Like, we're going to take you to this place, feed you rice and beans, beast you hard with training, and you'll lose loads of weight. But when you finish, you'll have had a horrible time and it will all go back on. I was like, well, actually, let's partner with 5-star resorts. Let's have a healthy menu. But if people want to also have a burger and a beer, they can, because we're going to introduce, modules on nutrition. We're going to talk to them about their beliefs, about their mindset, how they change those, as well as all the training. And that was the birth of 38 Degrees North. And we went from there. Claire joins me into that endeavor. I guess we'll get more into our story in a minute. And that was all going great guns, Bernie. It was amazing. And 2020 was shaping up to be our best year ever. We'd planned more retreats. We were 85% booked. And then this pesky thing called COVID came along. Shut the world down.
Yeah.
So we pivoted into online. We'd already had the podcast, Midlife Mentors. We thought, okay, how can we help midlifers? We developed this program that's holistic. It is about the mind and the body. And we went from there.
Yeah. And then just a little bit, because James has obviously given you the more recent stuff. But for me, it's funny, before we jumped on, you were saying about marketing and stuff as well. Like, I got a degree in PR and marketing and found out that I absolutely hated it. So unfortunately, I'd got a degree in PR and marketing and started off at Harrods, actually. That was my first job back in 1999. Harrods, and that was quite the experience. And then I just kind of stayed in it for 15 years. I got really, really hooked into the lifestyle, the money it was giving me, the status it was giving me, but it never actually fulfilled me at all. And all that time, I was doing lots of other psychology kind of based stuff. I became a stress management consultant. I became a life and business coach. I launched a couple of businesses on the side, but then didn't have the courage to really see them through, and the self-belief and the self-worth. So I really struggled in my 20s and kind of like into my early 30s to find that fulfillment. But I knew there was something more that I wanted to do. And it was only my own experience of going through a divorce, being put on antidepressants, piling on the pounds, being very, very sick mentally and physically and spiritually, that I then discovered nutrition and the power of moving my body. And then I was able to come off the antidepressants, and I was like, I'm hooked. I want to show other people the power of the mind, body, and spiritual approach all in one, because I'd done all the psychology stuff. And then this new world of health and wellness came forward for me. So I ditched everything else, qualified as a personal trainer, nutritionist, like all these bits and bobs, and pulled it all together, and then met this one.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that backstory. Why don't you continue? So, when the two of you met, I'd like to understand a little bit about kind of the mindset that you both had at the time, because a lot of people in midlife, and I'm not one of them, I've been happily married 37 years, but a lot of people in midlife do go through transitions, divorce, that sort of thing. And what I've heard, because again, I haven't experienced it myself, is that sometimes finding a new relationship, giving yourself permission, so to speak, to kind of really engage in that relationship, it's not easy. So maybe you can share a little bit of not only your story, but what you've learned from it.
We learned so much, so much. And, I think it is tricky at midlife. The first thing I'll say is, we have so much experience, I think is a nice word. Baggage might be the other way we frame it, when we come in midlife to a new relationship. So our story is we'd known each other. We were kind of in the same friendship group. And Claire was obviously flying out to Ibiza, and she was friends with friends of mine and friends of my wife. So I actually found out my wife left me. We separated. She basically walked out of the relationship. And I didn't know for about 3 months that the same thing had happened to Claire with her husband. And then I found out, and I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. So that's kind of how we started to get together. But in terms of how it impacted me, I think, I was in my mid-40s. I thought I was running this business with my life partner. I was suddenly on my own. And you have all these feelings of rejection, of abandonment. I was having to hold it together for the business, for my team, for clients. But, behind the scenes, I was a wreck. My confidence was shot. I wasn't interested in dating for age. I couldn't see a way forward. I was like, I'm a washed up guy in my 40s. I've been walked out on. Who's going to want me now? And I had to go through this kind of like long, dark night of the soul until I kind of like, right, I've got some of these tools. I need to start applying, pull myself together. I sought external help and gradually kind of clawed my way back to a more positive perspective. And then I met Claire, and we kind of, it was difficult because I was in Ibiza, she was in the UK. We were on, off until we finally got together. But when we did get together, I think it's interesting. We both thought, okay, we've worked through that really unpleasant period of being single and redefining who you are, and kind of trying to work out what went wrong last time and what can I fix about myself? Who am I? We're like, right, this is great. But honestly, we had so much baggage we were still carrying. And that was a big thing. It's a big commitment from both of us to actually acknowledge that and then be prepared to commit to each other and work through it.
Yeah. And I think that lasted, here's the thing. People have rose-tinted glasses, I think, about that honeymoon period, right? But actually, we launched ourselves into a relationship and working together all at once. So that's a big, big commitment for both of us. I started working in James's business. And so there was a lot of an inferiority complex. There was so much that I thought I'd worked for that moving to Ibiza and then being with James brought up for me. It was like every single little girl fear that I'd ever had and tried to shut down was just brought to the surface. And the truth be known, like, it was so intense working together as well. That lasted for a good number of years of trying to figure it out. It was sometimes explosive, but amazing at the same time. We really knew, like, we look back now, like, we absolutely knew that either of us could have walked away at any point, and probably at moments should have, but neither of us never ever wanted to, because we could see the potential. And you couldn't explain that to anyone. I mean, everyone else on the surface would have thought, oh, those guys, they're the dream team. It's amazing. But then, like everything, that's just what you're seeing on the surface. We had to work through a lot. And I think that's the thing about relationships is they're so disposable these days. It's that whole swipe left, swipe left. It's so disposable. But the best bit of your relationship comes when you dig deep. It's not the beginning. The most beautiful parts of a relationship are when you fail, you pick yourself up again, you fail, you pick yourself up again, and you really commit, even though it's difficult. And because every single relationship, I love that one of your pillars is relationship, because we're human beings, we're in relationship. That's what we're here for, is to have relationships. And they are the biggest stressor, but the biggest gift, because if we can stay, they will reflect back at you what you need to work on yourself. And once you do, and can you commit to that and take responsibility for working on that yourself, oh my goodness, like the whole world opens up in such an incredible way.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of things I heard that I want to share with you before I ask a follow-on question. I heard that you, of course, both went through a divorce, but you also immediately after that went through a period of, things were dark and you were down, and it was a challenging time for you. And then when you came together, you realized what you had in common, but you also, as you said, Claire, came together not only as a couple, but also as business partners, which is like a double whammy from a relationship standpoint, right? And but I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that a little bit from the standpoint of hosting your podcast, the Midlife Mentors podcast, which is a terrific podcast. I mentioned that I think I mentioned this before we started recording, that I did a bunch of research before I launched the Midlife Fulfill podcast. I came across probably a couple hundred podcasts that cover the midlife space, and identified less than 10 that I thought were really good. And yours was one of them. So I'm not BSing you. I've been listening to your podcast. But anyway, I digress a little bit. How have the two of you made that work? Because speaking as a podcaster myself, I don't have a co-host. So I don't know what it's like to have a co-host. And here the two of you are in this, well, it's maybe not a new relationship at this point, but at one point it was new, and you were hosting a podcast together. How are you pulling that off?
It's a really good question, and I think it's very, very different now. But for me, we have very, very different ways of approaching everything, Bernie. Like I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I've been in recovery basically since being with James, because James is fly by the seat of his pants, get stuff out there, don't worry if it's too perfect, and I would be kicking and screaming going, no, don't get it out, don't let it out. So at the beginning of the podcast, that's kind of what it was like, and I would plan it. And I said, you do this bit, you do this bit, you do this bit. And James would be like, oh my goodness, enough already. Let's just get on and do it. I mean, I think it's practice, right? And getting to know each other's styles. But it's also about, as we've gone through, I'm sure people, and I hope they have seen the journey of our marriage, of our relationship, actually, just in the style of that podcast. Because I think the more we've become grounded and comfortable with ourselves, and it's not the ego fighting the ego, I think it's just, I mean, I love doing it much more. I know I'm speaking for you, but I know that we just enjoy it. We just get on. We do a couple of points. We just get on and we just do it. And who takes what points is who takes what points. And it's actually about encouraging the other person. And I think because we're such ambitious people, right at the beginning of that podcast and our working relationship, we could come up against each other, being a bit competitive with each other. And the ego's kind of fighting to, I want to say that, I want to say that. But now we just, because we have this, just such a growth. We've had such growth in our marriage, particularly over the last 18 months. There is a real warmth to it, I hope, and also an understanding of what James's strengths are, and encouraging him when he says something. I'm like, yeah, that was a great thing to say. That was great. And I think the energy is just very different now.
I was going to say, I think that's a great answer, Claire. I think there's two aspects here, right? You touched on there's a relationship itself, and then there's the working together, and it was a double whammy. and a big double whammy. And in a way, I think it was positive for us, and it accelerated everything. But just on
we can say that now, looking back.
Like I said, the relationship thing, and I think people will resonate with this for anything new that they're doing, whether they're, you know, going for a new career or relationship side hustle. There's a lot of fear, I think, at midlife for a lot of people. I think when we're young, we have less fear, right? We play to win. When we get older, we become a lot more risk averse. There's a lot of fear, and I think the natural inclination, and in the relationship, I'll speak for myself personally here, I had a lot of fears. But I didn't want to voice them to appear that I was scared. So I was pushing them down, and it manifests in other ways. At the point I could actually acknowledge, like, you know what, I am scared. These are things I'm afraid of. I could face those and deal with them. And we talked them through, and we dealt with them together. And I think that's, you know, great advice for anyone in any situation, not just relationships. That's relationship side. Of course, that overlaps into work. Then, like Claire said, it was a learning, you know, different styles and how we complement each other. And then, you know, how we split business tasks, you know, who does what. And we work really well together now, I think, as a team.
I love the way he was checking in there. I think we do. We work great together now. It's really lovely.
What I'll say, and this is authentic, I'm not, you know, blowing any smoke here, is that the two of you come across on your podcast just very authentic, very in love with each other, very collaborative with each other, very intent on delivering value to your listener, to your audience. So that's one of the reasons that, you know, I became attracted to your podcast, because you're just real people, and that comes across in your podcast. So I congratulate you on that.
Thank you. It means such a lot. It means such a lot. Thank you.
Good. Well, I mean it. I know that the two of you offer all kinds of, well, I don't know about all kinds, but many valuable services to the midlife community. Correct me if I'm wrong, but marriage counseling is not one of them. Is that right? Okay. All right.
Well, yeah.
However, even though marriage counseling is not a service offering, I would like you to maybe not reframe, but think about what we've discussed so far, and how would you kind of frame that up to someone listening in a midlife season who is maybe going through this transition period? What kind of advice, if you will, and if you don't want to use the word advice, like what would you encourage people to be thinking about and considering? And of course, everyone's got a unique scenario. We know that, but in general, how would you maybe comment on that?
So I'll give a general overview first. I think, you know, it's easy to feel that we're just where we are in life, and that's kind of our destiny, and not think about it too much. But actually, I'd encourage people to think about, well, this is where I am right now, but actually, what do I want from my life? What do I want to be? Where do I want to go? Because it's not too late. We can make those changes, and we have the power within us to do it. So I think the first step is actually like evaluating your life. It's something we go through with clients, you know. Where are you directing energy in certain areas? Is your life what you want it to be? What would you like it to be? And then let's start building towards that. I'd say in relationships, and again, this is my experience working, you know, we have worked with people in relationships, and they're like, well, it's kind of, you know, lost its sparkle a little bit. I think, you know, it's only natural as time goes by and we compromise, we can start to take the other person for granted maybe, and we lose that special edge. So I encourage people listening, like, just think about how much energy you're maybe putting into things like your career versus how much you're putting into your relationship. How are you showing up? Flip it around. How would you like your partner to show up? Then be that person, right? Think about how I can show more interest, how I can have deep communication. And it doesn't have to mean big changes. It can just be like 5 minutes to start a day, you know, like just getting your partner and going, hey, I really want to know, like, how are you feeling this morning? What's going on for you? What are your emotions? And really listening to them. Just doing something as simple as that and holding eye contact can really start to help build more depth of communication and intimacy. So those would be my kind of top level tips.
Okay. Claire, anything you want to add?
No, I just think, you know, like James was saying right at the beginning, I do, and has actually said, I think there is a lot of fear when we reach this time of our life, that all the things that we've gathered, you know, it's almost like the empty promise, isn't it? We used the word happy before we started recording. You know, I'm seeking happiness. And it's the promise almost that never comes, because as we know, happiness is an inside job. But I love the fact that this is all about fulfillment, because actually happiness is an emotion, and we're promised, even from when we're little, oh, you know, get the get the exams, and then you'll go to that school, get to university, and then you'll get that job, and then you get that house, and then you get that relationship, and so we're always constantly waiting to be happy, but never actually being taught or understanding or discovering what happiness really is to us. And it's in the moment, it's in the present moment. And most of us can't actually have never even worked the muscle of being in the present moment. Gratitude for what we already have. So there's a lot of fear, I think, when we get to this time of life, that we don't know what it means to be happy. We're constantly on this treadmill that we've always been on, and the idea of even remotely stepping off it is completely terrifying. And there's a worry that you're going to lose the things that you've built around you, almost to protect yourself. So what I would say is, I would say everyone at midlife gets this feeling. We call it the midlife crisis. It's a really unfair thing to call it. I'd like to call it midlife reinvention, where we get an opportunity to use the wisdom of age to build a new narrative for ourselves, and therefore a new life for ourselves. And our values all change. When we get to this time of our life, our values have changed. And the fact that your actions are no longer in line with your new values, that's why you feel so uncomfortable.
Clara, I love that you're making that point. I make that same point as well. And that is, look at your current values. How are they different than they used to be? And how is your current lifestyle aligned with your current values? Because oftentimes what I encounter is people whose lifestyle is aligned with their values from the past.
Exactly.
And so you get this tremendous disconnect going on because their values and their lifestyle are not aligned.
Exactly
that. I just want to add something. I read this recently. I might paraphrase it wrongly. So I think it's really relevant in the social media age. And when I say it, I think we realize how much social media drives this. So I think it was St. Anthony centuries ago said, the recipe for unhappiness is to spend your time regretting the past, focusing on future things for happiness, and not being grateful for the present moment. That was his recipe for unhappiness centuries ago. And that's pretty much what social media drives to us all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a whole other topic for another podcast for sure. I want to go to a topic that is something we have in common. We both, both meaning you two and myself, have a passion for fitness. As you know, it's one of my 5 pillars: health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. We've been talking about relationships. Speak to your passion, your devotion, your commitment to fitness, and kind of where it fits in with your relationship. And you're both smiling right now.
Yeah. Well, to be quite honest with you, everyone's like, oh, Claire, you must have always been into fitness. You must have always, had that physique that you've had, blah, blah, blah. It's absolute BS. It really is. Like I didn't get into fitness. I think I kind of mentioned, I didn't get into fitness and weightlifting and all of that kind of stuff until I was 33. And it really genuinely saved my life. Like, honestly, it saved my mental health, my physical health. I was going down a spiral of drinking loads all the time. So it really was a massive passion for me. And the weight training was what gave me my power back. So I never weight trained, and I just fell in love with it. It was amazing. And that's why I wanted to start helping other women, particularly to regain their power, their empowerment through their physicality. And then that in turn, as we know, starts to positively impact our neural pathways in our brain and gives us a feeling of less stress, feel good hormones. So that's where I got into it. And then James had always, you can tell your story, but you'd always been into fitness. But when we got together, this is the funny story, I was the weight training girl. Like, I loved weight training. James was the cardio guy. So when we got together and I moved to Ibiza, he was like, right, it's 6 a.m. Let's get up and do our cardio. And I was like, mate, you're like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. This is not going to work. And, you're going to have to ply me with copious amounts of coffee before I get anywhere. Well, anyway, he turned me into a morning person. But it did take about 9 months before I was like a sloth. the good hour. He had to kind of get me up, and then I was finally outside doing cardio about an hour later, completely caffeinated up. But like, actually, that was so amazing for me because he gave me a passion again for different kinds of functional training. And on the flip side, I was like, you need to be doing this in the gym. You need to be weight training in this way. So it really brought us together. And I do think actually what we see at midlife is this brings couples together. We've had couples come on our midlife reset program and really find a new lease of life in their marriage, in their relationship, where they are saying, this is a priority, and we're going to do this together, and we're going to be healthy together. Because sometimes what we do see is one goes off in one direction of starting to prioritize their health and wellness, and the other one doesn't. So they end up kind of shifting away from them. And actually, sometimes the partner can start to sabotage the really good efforts of that person. So I do think it's a really strong linchpin that can pull couples together. And it certainly did with us.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I know my wife and I have had that in common since we were dating, and we've been married 37 years. And so
Amazing.
I can attest to that same thing, that, fitness is something that's always been important to us. And so what I'm hearing you say, Claire, is that it's part of your programs. It's part of, so maybe it is a form of marriage counseling. Maybe you didn't even know that you were doing marriage counseling through your fitness programs. I see James nodding his head.
Well, I think it's interesting, because I think in the modern world, we've moved, post-industrial revolution, we've moved to a much more sedentary lifestyle, most people, right? But actually, from an evolutionary perspective, we're not designed to be sat around in chairs all day doing nothing. I mean, you have to look at, the obesity issues that we have in the Western world now with, poor food environment and lack of movement. And I think whether we decide we want to work on our mind or not, it's important to recognize the role that the body has in that as well. We do have a mind-body connection, which is why I think we've always said that movement is part of what we offer. Even if someone comes to us and they're like, oh, I just want to work on my goals for, we're like, okay, but what's your physical health like? Because we want to make sure we're dialing in on that as well. I think it's so important. They're so interconnected. And I think a lot of science is only just catching up on that, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, what's next for the two of you as midlife mentors? Where are you headed?
Great question. Well, I think encouragingly for us, we've seen a lot of growth of interest from organizations, corporations, for us to come in and talk to their workforces about issues, some related to midlife. So we do a lot around the menopause, a lot around andropause, low testosterone for men. We go in and talk about stress and how to manage it effectively. We talk about communication and relationships. So the corporate side of things is something that we really love doing and excites us. So that's one thing. And then I guess we're carrying on our one-to-one coaching, our reset program, and the podcast. Yeah, we've got a few other little things bubbling under, but we can't really reveal them yet.
Can't reveal them yet. Okay.
No, he's not allowed to talk about some of the things that it's not for me, it's him. He's doing amazing stuff. So I'm very excited when you can do the big reveal.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to learn more about that when the timing is right. And James and Claire, I share your passion for working with and helping corporate organizations because, of course, businesses are made up of people, and there's an intergenerational workforce in businesses, no matter what the location is, whether it's in the UK or for me here in the US. It's just companies made up of people of all different ages and demographics. And I think a lot of organizations welcome some assistance on the kinds of things that you and I can do to help their employees thrive more, achieve more fulfillment. And of course, that helps with employee retention. I want to ask for a closing thought. Anything that we've discussed so far that you'd like to maybe put an exclamation point on?
It's, for me, it's very, very simple. It's really never too late. And I've got another kind of explanation. It's never too late, but also just really look at your life and think about what's truly important. Like when you take your last breath, are you going to be thinking about all the things that you've gathered around you, your status, the amount of money you had in the bank account, or are you going to think about how aligned with your soul that you were, and how the person that you became because of the things that you did, not necessarily things that you were kind of going out and striving for, but the things that you did as a person. I always try and keep that in my mind when I think about what's important to me, because we can get so pulled in different directions, can't we, with the striving and you've got to have this and the quick fixes and the fast. And actually, I always think, who do I want to become at this stage of my life, and what do I want to be proud of when I take my last breath?
Love that.
I would say I'm gonna echo what Claire said, but I'm also going to say don't let fear be the dominant player in your life. So don't be afraid to face your fears, because there's freedom on the other side of those for sure.
Fantastic. And where would you like to send my listener to just learn more about everything you've got going on and get into your world?
They can go to themidlifementors.com, and you can follow our podcast, The Midlife Mentors, and you can find us on Instagram at Midlife Mentors.
Fantastic. Well, my listener knows all that will be linked up in the show notes. My closing remark is the following, and this is not prepared. This is very much in the moment from my heart. And that is that you are a beautiful couple. And I'm choosing to use the word beautiful because it transcends physical appearance. I mean, you're a good looking couple, but it transcends physical appearance. The message you're delivering to the world through your podcast, through your services, is a very, very positive one. And you do it with passion and authenticity, and with quality and credentials. So everything about what you're doing is beautiful. And I just thank you for joining me today on this maximum episode of the Midlife Fulfill podcast to share you with my listening audience.
Thank you so
much, Bernie. Thank you.